From his humble beginnings as a WWE wrestler to his rise to fame as a beloved actor, this is the story of David Bautista. He is truly a man of many talents and a true entertainer. From his beginnings as a professional wrestler to becoming a Hollywood movie star, he has carved out an impressive career. His towering presence and chiseled physique have made him a standout in both worlds. But how did he make the leap from the wrestling ring to the silver screen? Let's take a deep dive into the life and career of the man himself. You might know him as Drax the Destroyer from Guardians of the Galaxy, or perhaps you remember him as the powerhouse behind the WWE's Bautista Bomb. But what you might not know is that this incredible performer had to fight hard to get to where he is today. Born in Washington, D.C. to a Greek mother and Filipino father, Bautista grew up in poverty. His grandfather was a taxi driver and barber, working multiple jobs to feed his family while his mother worked hard to make ends meet. Bautista often recalls the traumatic experiences he had to endure as a child, including 3 murders on his front lawn before the age of 9. As a teenager, Bautista turned to stealing cars to get by, a life of crime that continued until his early 20s. After a violent altercation as a bouncer at a nightclub, Bautista was arrested and given a sentence of probation. However, it was during this difficult time that he turned to bodybuilding, which he credits with saving his life. Down on the bustling streets of Washington, D.C., a young Bautista found himself immersed in the electric nightlife scene. Dropping out of high school at just 17, Bautista was in search of excitement and adventure. Little did he know he'd find himself in the whirlwind world of club bouncing, a job filled with danger, adrenaline, and unexpected challenges. For over a decade, Bautista navigated this high-octane lifestyle, facing flying bottles, fistfights, and even an arrest. But beneath the surface, Bautista's life had settled into a routine that just didn't seem to go anywhere. In his own words, he would bounce all night, work out, and sleep. This seemingly endless cycle had him trapped in a comfort zone that spanned 10 long years. It was only when Bautista reached the age of 30 that he started to question his path in life. As the weight of his complacency grew heavier, he realized he needed to make a change. But what could possibly break this unfulfilling routine? It wasn't until a devastating moment of shame. It was the late 90s and David was facing a tough situation. He couldn't afford to buy presents for his 2 daughters on Christmas. Feeling desperate and ashamed, he turned to someone he worked for at a club for help. He asked the guy if he could borrow some money just to get through the holidays. Can you imagine how embarrassing and humbling that must have been? But that moment was a turning point for David. He realized that he couldn't keep living like this. He had to find something more. With no education or fallback plan, he knew he had to get creative. And that's exactly what he did. So after the Christmas disaster, Dave Bautista found himself at an open tryout for World Championship Wrestling, thinking his years of weightlifting would give him an edge. But boy, was he wrong. The guy running the camp singled him and his training partner out, pushing them to their physical limits until they were literally puking and bleeding. Can you imagine the humiliation? The guy even told Dave to leave and that he'd never make it as a professional wrestler. Ouch. But Dave wasn't one to take rejection lying down. He signed up for classes at the Wild Samoan Training Center, a famous pro wrestling school in Pennsylvania where he fell in love with the physicality of the sport. The only problem, he had a serious case of stage fright. When the local news came to interview the school's top prospects, Dave's nerves got the best of him, and his lips started shaking so badly that they had to get someone else to do the interview. But despite his nerves, WWE saw something in him and signed him to a developmental contract in 2000. Talk about a comeback. He worked hard, put in the time, and eventually grew more comfortable with the performance side of pro wrestling. And his persona, Bautista, was an absolute force to be reckoned with in the ring. Fans and fellow wrestlers alike respected him for his monstrous powerbombs and spine-shattering moves. He was a beast, but that's not all. Dave's hard work paid off big time. He won the first of 6 world championships in 2005. And with that success came some pretty sweet perks. He traded his tiny DC apartment for a massive mega mansion in Tampa, Florida, and filled the driveway with a fleet of exotic cars and motorcycles. Can you even imagine? By 2009, Dave had become one of WWE's biggest stars. And with all that success, it's safe to say he's come a long way since that fateful Christmas in the 90s. Just when he had become one of the biggest WWE stars, things were really heating up for wrestlers in Hollywood. With superhero movies taking over Tinseltown and The Rock's film career blowing up, It seemed like there were more opportunities than ever before for muscle-bound stars like Dave Bautista. Finally, Hollywood was taking notice of the Goliaths they'd been ignoring for so long. But there was one problem. WWE wasn't exactly on board with their wrestlers pursuing movie careers. Dave had tried negotiating with them, but to no avail. So in January 2010, he made the bold decision to leave WWE behind and pursue acting full-time. At the time, Dave admits he couldn't have cared less about acting. He was really hitting his stride as a wrestler and was loving every minute of it. But he felt like he had no other choice. Denied the chance to pursue movies on the side like John Cena had, Dave was forced to bet on himself once again and set out to prove the doubters wrong. Now that's what I call courage. But it wasn't all smooth sailing as you'd like to hope. Things really hit rock bottom for Dave Bautista after he left WWE. He burned through his wrestling money, lost his house to foreclosure, and had to sell off all his cars and bikes just to make ends meet. He was starting from scratch, and it was a tough pill to swallow. But you know what they say, when you hit rock bottom, the only way to go is up. So Dave headed to LA to work with an acting coach and get his feet wet in the movie business. And even though he was desperate for work, he took advice from an old friend, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and refused to take on any horrible scripts just for the money. Instead, he was picky about the projects he took on, knowing that building a strong resume was more important in the long run. And boy, did that strategy pay off. Dave landed small roles in films like Riddick with Vin Diesel, which helped him build his skills and his reputation. And then came the big break. The role of Drax the Destroyer in Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. But getting that role wasn't easy. Dave endured months of grueling auditions and rumors of bigger names being considered for the part. But when he finally got the news that he'd landed the role, he was overcome with emotion. He had to pull over his car and cry tears of joy before rushing home to tell his wife the good news. You know what really lights a fire under Dave Bautista? The chance to work with one of his favorite directors, Denis Villeneuve. After working with Villeneuve on Blade Runner 2049 and both Dune films, Dave is absolutely smitten with the Canadian auteur. In fact, he said that if he could be the #1 on the call sheet for a Villeneuve film, he'd do it for free. That's how much he respects and admires the director. But even with all his success, Dave still struggles with anxiety and self-doubt. When he recently screened his film Glass Onion for the cast and crew of Dune Part 2, he was terrified. This was the first time he was watching himself in the film, and he was doing so in front of a room full of Hollywood heavyweights. But when the credits rolled, the theater erupted in laughter and applause, and even Javier Bardem was dancing through the aisles. It was a moment of deep connection and validation for Dave, and one he'll never forget. Despite his success though, Dave remains grounded and focused on his craft. He doesn't care about being a movie star or living a glamorous life. He just wants to be a better actor and earn the respect of his peers. He's not in it for the accolades, but for the experience of knowing he's accomplished something. And with his talent, drive, and dedication, there's no doubt that Dave Bautista will continue to accomplish great things in Hollywood and beyond.